I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that this might just be the best two teams in the nation going against each other. Think about it like this: the betting markets know about as much as anybody, and they have Ohio State as the favorite in this game, and Oregon is the closest thing to a slam dunk for a number one team in college this year. So it really is a great matchup. With that said, we're going to start off with the advantages for Ohio State. And their first one is a really good on really, really good matchup, as Oregon has a quality run blocking unit ranking 26th in PFF run blocking grade. And they're going against a great Ohio State run defense that ranks second in PFF run grade. I do think that Ohio State deservedly has the better ranking because, in addition to Oregon having an injury on the offensive line at right guard that is rather major, they are really good players, but not necessarily exceptional ones. And you'll take that any day of the week for an offensive line, because the offensive line is really as good as your weakest guy is. And they have, aside from their right guard, no weaknesses in the run blocking department. But for Ohio State, they have some really elite players. Chiefly, their two edges, and they also have a great defensive tackle as well. Tyleik Williams is, I would say, amongst the 20 or so best defensive tackles in defending the run in college football. So he is a great anchor for the run defense. And in addition to him, they have really good linebacker play as well, with Cody Simon being one of the best run defending linebackers in college. And they also have Sonny Styles as a solid run defender as well. He's not nearly as good as Simon is, but he's not an issue whatsoever. So their entire front seven is competent at defending the run, and there are some guys that are even far better than that. I didn't mention Ty Hamilton. Hamilton is not great as a run defender. He's just about average, I would say. So you have two average players, and then you have exceptional players. So that is a really good run stuffing team. They have good safeties to defend the run also, which is an underrated aspect of defending the run, is to have everybody in their run fits and capable of defending. So they have that in spades. So it is really nice for Ohio State in any run defending avenue. They're going to get their safeties involved. They're going to get their linebackers involved. Of course, they have their defensive line engaged. It's really good. The next thing for Ohio State is, as I mentioned before, with Oregon having a backup right guard in, that's going to be something that can be attacked by Ohio State. Dave Ioli, I think is how you pronounce his name. I apologize, I'm very bad with names. He is a 4-week starter, and that is a very minimal amount of experience for such a high leverage matchup against such a high quality opponent. But Ioli is going against a very good pass rushing Ty Hamilton, and I believe that Ohio State is going to isolate Hamilton on Ioli, because if they can get one-on-one matchups, that's going to be really problematic for Oregon, I believe. And Tyleik Williams, he can push the pocket a little bit, but he's not much of a pass rusher. He's much more of a run specialist. So I think that they're going to try to get Hamilton as the player engaged with Iuli. And if they're able to do that, I think that really could be a good edge for Ohio State because interior pressure is going to be problematic for nearly any quarterback. The next advantage for Ohio State is again on the defensive line. This is not surprising, probably, because it is, I think, a well regarded fact that Ohio State has one of the best defensive lines in all of college football. This time, the advantage relates to the stud pass rushing Jack Sawyer, who is a big boy at 260 pounds. He's going against a good pass blocking Johnny Cornelius, but Cornelius is just good, I would say, and Sawyer is elite. So there is a matchup advantage for Ohio State. So I think that this should be a pretty decisive advantage for Sawyer. Again, you don't want to say that a good offensive lineman is problematic because as long as you don't have a weakness on the line, you have a pretty good line at hand. But when you're going against the elite of the elite, even good linemen can look a little bit less than ideal. The next advantage for Ohio State is again with pass rushing, with star pass rusher, linebacker Cody Simon, who will be more than likely attacking a sound Nashad Strother. Nashad is, as I mentioned, sound, but he is not of the cloth that Simon is. So I think that's an advantage again for Ohio State is that they could get a one-on-one matchup with Simon on Strother with blitzing to get in isolation. So I think that'll be something you have to watch out for with Ohio State is if they are on like key third downs, especially going to get Simon involved as a blitzer. Ohio State does not usually have a need to blitz, but I think there is going to be some logic to them blitzing at points in this game, if for nothing else than to keep Oregon honest, but also to get some favorable matchups from the linebacker position or to make sure that Ty Hamilton is getting a one-on-one with a weaker player in Ioli. The next thing I like for Ohio State is the final defensive advantage with a good cornerback Denzel Burke versus a mid-wide receiver in Evan Stewart. Burke can struggle in man coverage, which is a bit worrisome because he plays man 35% of the time. So this is a predicated advantage on him being in zone more so than man. If he's going to be in man, he's going to need to be on his absolute best behavior. But I think more than likely it's going to have to involve him being in zone because there the talent matchup would be a bit more favorable for Ohio State. The next advantage is the final advantage for Ohio State in that they have a gem on offense, this is, in wide receiver Emeka Egbuka versus a meh nickelback in Brandon Johnson. He should be in zone coverage as well, but he is, Johnson that is, of course, in man coverage a great deal as he is used at an insanely high 42% rate for man coverage, which is just absurd. You'll generally see like maybe 25% as a benchmark for man coverage usage. So he's nearly at double that. And Egbuka is far too good to be used against in man coverage by basically any player, let alone a not so good nickelback. So that's going to be a huge advantage for Ohio State, possibly, if Oregon is not smart enough to defend in a way that they have not defended for much of the year, because they just do like using their nickelbacks in man coverage at an extremely high percent. As we shift to Oregon, if you like this video, make sure you like and subscribe, because I'll be pushing out more football content. And with that said, the Oregon advantages start at quarterback, which is always a great thing to have up your sleeve, with the gem Dillon Gabriel, who's second in quarterback rating, and he's going against a quality Will Howard, who is third in quarterback rating. So you might be wondering how this is an advantage. Gabriel is third in expected points added, which is a fantastic stat, and Howard is 17th in EPA. So there is a bit of a difference between the two, and Gabriel, he does have the better offensive line than Howard does. Tez Johnson, he is great, and he's going against an above average Jordan Hancock. Hancock is great in man coverage, great to the point that I could see a world in which Hancock is going to man up Tez Johnson, and I could see him having success in that avenue as well. Hancock plays man about 37% of the time, so again, a high number. It could be an absolute slugfest between these two, because they are both super talented and they could be going at each other one-on-one the entire game. I would love to see that. Terrence Ferguson is a star tight end, and he's going against sound cover linebackers in Sonny Styles and Cody Simon, as I mentioned before as well. They're both very good players, particularly Simon, but Styles is nothing to scoff at either. And Ferguson is, I think, going to have the upper hand, because he is in that elite tier of tight end, which is a little bit hard to define, because in the pros and in college, there is just such a tier gap between like the top two tight ends and everybody else that's really, really good. And I would say that Ferguson is in the second tier of really, really good, but you could still argue that he's in the elite tier as well. So I like the matchup of him against Styles and Simon. I think that both linebackers are very high end players, but just a little bit lower quality than Ferguson is. Shifting to the defense now, they have a lot of pass rushing advantages as well, just like Ohio State does, where they have a good pass rushing Mateo Yu. I can't pronounce his last name because, as I mentioned before, I'm bad with names. He is against a poor pass blocking Donovan Jackson. So that is a matchup I like for Oregon quite a bit. Another one that I'm a fan of is the solid pass rushing Jamari Caldwell versus a weak to terrible Ohio State interior offensive line. So that is another nice advantage. And then there is, for the interior, once again, a star pass rushing Derek Harmon versus a bad to awful Ohio State interior offensive line. So that's again problematic for Ohio State. Lastly, there is the above average pass rusher, Titum Tui Odo, I think is how you say that. I'm sorry, I'm butchering names left and right, not even pronouncing them in other instances. He is against a below average Josh Fryer. So that should be, again, a nice advantage for Oregon, which leads to the conclusion, because that is the last advantage for either team. Who am I leaning? That is a great question. That's one that I ask myself continually, because initially I was leaning Ohio State, and then I started leaning Oregon, and in the end, I'm leaning Oregon once again. I think that they do have the advantage in a more balanced way, which is very helpful. They obviously have the edge at quarterback, which is a big deal. And that is something I keep going back to for what I like to base the entire analysis on. And in addition to that, I like the defensive line for Oregon. I think that it is about as good as Ohio State's is. It's not quite as good, I wouldn't say, but it's in a similar vein. And there is some star receivers for Oregon as well. So I think that there are just a little bit more spread out advantages for Oregon than there are for Ohio State. And I think that that's going to be perhaps the difference in this game. Those are my thoughts, though. Be sure to let me know what yours are in the comment section, and also be sure to like and subscribe.